On February 25, 2005, a 59-year-old compliance officer was arrested outside his home in Park City, Kansas. His neighbors were shocked. He was a church council president, a Boy Scout leader, a husband and father. But Dennis Rader was living a double life. For 3 decades, he had been one of America's most elusive serial killers. This is the story of BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill, a man who terrorized Wichita for decades, taunted police with cryptic letters, and was finally caught by a technology he didn't understand. This is the full case overview. January 15, 1974, Charlie Otero, age 15, arrived home from school to find his house eerily quiet. What he discovered inside would haunt Wichita for over 30 years. His father, Joseph Otero, age 38, had been strangled. His mother, Julie, age 33, was found in the bedroom. His brother, Joey, just 9 years old, and his sister, Josie, 11, had also been murdered. The killer had spent hours in the house. He had brought his own rope and tape. The positioning of the bodies suggested ritual. A plastic bag had been placed over Julie Otero's head. Young Josie had been hanged in the basement. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing of significant value was taken. This was something darker. The Wichita Police Department had never seen anything like it. The methodical nature, the time spent at the scene, the apparent lack of motive. This was a killer who enjoyed what he did. But then, nothing, no leads, no suspects. The case grew cold. 3 months later, a local newspaper received an anonymous phone call directing them to a book in the Wichita Public Library. Inside that book was a letter. The writer took credit for the Otero murders and provided details only the killer would know. He complained that the media wasn't giving him enough attention. He wanted a name, a title that would strike fear. He signed the letter BTK. Bind them, torture them, kill them. The killer had announced himself. Over the next 3 years, BTK struck again and again. April 1974, Catherine Bright, age 21, was stabbed to death in her home. Her brother Kevin survived despite being shot twice. March 1977, Shirley Vians, age 24, was murdered in her home while her children were locked in the bathroom. December 1977, Nancy Fox, age 25, was strangled in her bedroom. BTK called the police himself to report this one, directing them to her body.
A pattern emerged. He selected victims methodically, often conducting surveillance beforehand. He entered homes, took control through fear and restraint, and killed slowly. For him, it was about power and control. Wichita was paralyzed with fear. Women bought deadbolts and dogs, gun sales skyrocketed, police received thousands of tips, but BTK remained a ghost. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, he went silent. For years, nothing, no murders, no letters, no contact. Investigators wondered if BTK had died, been imprisoned for another crime, or simply stopped. But he hadn't stopped. Not entirely. In 1985, marine biologist Vicki Wegerle was murdered in her home. At the time, police didn't connect it to BTK. The case went unsolved. In 1986, Dolores Davis disappeared from her home. Her body was found 13 days later under a bridge. Again, no connection was made to BTK at the time. Meanwhile, Dennis Rader was living an ordinary life. He had married in 1971, before the first murders. He had 2 children. He worked for ADT Security Services, ironically installing alarm systems. In 1991, he became a compliance officer for Park City, enforcing city ordinances, measuring dog pen sizes, checking on overgrown lawns. His co-workers found him annoying, petty, overly bureaucratic, but dangerous? No one suspected. He was active in his Lutheran church. He was a Cub Scout leader. He attended his children's school events. He was, by all appearances, boringly normal. This is what made Dennis Rader so terrifying. He wasn't a loner living on society's margins. He was embedded in his community, hiding in plain sight. So, why did he stop killing for so long? Criminal psychologists suggest several possibilities. The birth of his children may have temporarily satisfied his need for control. His work as a compliance officer gave him legal power over others. He may have been engaging in other criminal behavior that satisfied his urges without the risk of murder. But perhaps most chillingly, he was reliving his crimes. BTK kept detailed records, photographs, drawings. He created what he called his projects, elaborate fantasy documents about his victims and potential future victims. He would visit these materials, essentially recreating the experience. For BTK, the killing wasn't just about the moment. It was about possession, about having complete control over another person's life and death forever. But by the early 2000s, something changed. Perhaps it was age, perhaps it was ego, perhaps it was a need for recognition. Whatever the reason, BTK decided it was time to remind Wichita that he was still out there. On March 17, 2004, the Wichita Eagle received a letter. Inside was a photocopy of Vicki Wegerle's driver's license and photos of her body. BTK was taking credit for a murder from 1985 that police didn't connect him to. The message was clear. I'm still here, I did this, and you missed it. Over the next year, BTK sent at least 11 communications to the media and police. He was taunting them, playing games, sending puzzles. He mailed a package containing Dolores Davis's driver's license and jewelry. He left packages in public places with instructions for police. He wanted attention. He wanted to be remembered, and that need for recognition would be his downfall. In January 2005, BTK sent a message asking if police could trace information from a floppy disk. He wanted to keep communicating but was worried about being caught. In a decision that investigators would later call crucial, they lied. They told him through a newspaper ad, "Rex, it will be okay." BTK trusted them. On February 16, 2005, a purple floppy disk was found in a Home Depot parking lot, placed inside a plastic bag and taped to the back of a cereal box. The disk contained a deleted document. When forensic examiners recovered the metadata, they found something BTK had forgotten to erase. Information showing the document had been created at Christ Lutheran Church, and the username was Dennis. Investigators immediately began searching for Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. They found Dennis Rader, the church council president. They pulled his daughter's medical records from her time at Kansas State University to obtain a DNA sample. It was a familial match to DNA recovered from crime scenes. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was pulled over and arrested near his home. He was calm, polite even. When investigators asked if he knew why he was being arrested, he simply said, "Oh, I have my suspicions." In custody, Rader seemed almost relieved. He had been caught. But on some level, this is what he wanted: recognition, notoriety, to be known. When asked about the floppy disk, about whether it could be traced, he asked investigators, "Can you trace it? Be honest." They told him yes. His response, well, that's a big disappointment. He had trusted them, and they had lied. It was a fitting end for a man who had lied to everyone for 30 years. Dennis Rader confessed immediately, not with remorse, but with pride. He described his crimes in meticulous detail. He showed investigators where he had hidden items. He even corrected them when they got facts wrong. He called his victims his projects. He spoke of them as possessions, as objects. There was no empathy, no guilt, no humanity in his words. On June 27, 2005, Dennis Rader pled guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. Kansas had no death penalty at the time, so he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms with a minimum of 175 years before parole eligibility. During his sentencing hearing, victims' families confronted him directly. They called him a coward, a monster, pathetic. Rader sat emotionless, occasionally adjusting his glasses. When given a chance to speak, he thanked his lawyers. He talked about his victims as his projects again. He showed no remorse. The judge called him a black hole and told him he would never be paroled. It's important to remember that this story isn't really about Dennis Rader. It's about the lives he destroyed. Joseph, Julie, Joey, and Josie Otero, a family torn apart. Catherine Bright, age 21, who fought for her life. Shirley Vian, age 24, a mother who tried to protect her children. Nancy Fox, age 25, who lived alone and tried to be safe. Maureen Hedge, age 53, a neighbor Rader had known for years. Vicki Wegerly, age 28, killed while her husband was at work. Dolores Davis, age 62, a widow who lived alone. These weren't projects. They were people with families, friends, dreams, and futures that Dennis Rader stole from them. The BTK case changed criminal investigation in several important ways. It demonstrated the importance of preserving cold cases. Evidence from decades-old crimes, including DNA samples, ultimately helped confirm Rader's identity. It showed how digital forensics could solve even the most elusive cases. That floppy disk metadata was the key that unlocked everything. It proved that serial killers don't always fit the profile. Dennis Rader wasn't a transient drifter. He was married, employed, involved in his community. He could hide for decades because no one suspected someone so ordinary. And it revealed the importance of communication with offenders. By lying to Rader about the floppy disk, investigators used his own ego against him. Dennis Rader is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. He's been denied media interviews and his communications are heavily restricted. He will die in prison. In 2021, he was interviewed by investigators about potential connections to additional unsolved cases. He has been investigated for possible involvement in the disappearance of Sean Beth Dykeman and the murder of Cynthia Kinney, though no charges have been filed. The BTK case reminds us that evil doesn't always announce itself. It can live next door, attend church every Sunday, coach your child's sports team. Dennis Rader wasn't a monster in appearance. He was a monster indeed. But it also reminds us that, eventually, almost every criminal makes a mistake. For Rader, it was trusting the police and not understanding technology. His need for attention, for recognition, for control, ultimately led to his capture. The people of Wichita can finally rest, knowing that BTK will never hurt anyone again.